Rube, the combine well underway here in Indianapolis. It's already been a busy week, and we're 2 days in.
How do the kickers look so far?
Yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm here to scout the kickers and the punters and long snappers, of course. My specialty.
Can't hurt to scout the punters for this team.
Yeah, that's true. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro here in a warm Indianapolis. Pretty crazy. The weather's been, we talked about it in the last pod, but I can't get over it because normally it's miserable. I caught myself walking through all these, the tunnels in Indianapolis in the convention center. And then I remembered it was 70 degrees out. And I was like, let me go outside, because you're just like so used to being inside in this city.
Yeah, Indianapolis it's interesting because there's like elevated walkways that connect the whole downtown, really, the hotels and the convention center and the stadium, kind of like Minneapolis. They have the Skyway. They have it because it's cold all the time, as we know. But yeah, they have that in Indianapolis, and it's kind of cool. But it's also nice to be outside a little bit.
Yeah, it is. As always, we have a bunch to get to today. We already talked a lot about Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman in their comments from earlier in the week, but we still have a little bit more to dig through there. We want to talk about some prospects and what might make sense for the Eagles, especially in the first round of the draft. But I wanted to start here with a tweet from CJ Gardner-Johnson on Wednesday morning. It wasn't a great look. It was in response to a video tweeted out by Elliott Shore-Parks of WIP. It was Jonathan Gannon and taking some blame for the Super Bowl, saying he didn't put his players in the right position. And CJ tweeted out, and I'm quoting him here, "You ain't put us in position to make plays," with a shrug emoji, which is what Gannon said, but it's probably not a good look for CJ to tweet that, especially when he's about to become a free agent.
Yeah, and I think what bothered me the most, we all know it was a bad game for Gannon, or a bad second half. Jonathan Gannon put GJ in position to intercept 6 passes and lead the league and help him get that big contract that he's going to get, whether it's here or somewhere else. So they talk about accountability all the time. I mean, there's a reason CJ intercepted all those passes, because his defensive coordinator, look, he's a great player and he's athletic and he made some incredible plays, but you can't have it both ways. That's what bothered me. We all know it was not a good ending for the Jonathan Gannon era in Philadelphia. And I understand CJ's frustration, but it's not a good look. It makes him look petty. It makes him look unaccountable. I mean, those guys are allowed to make plays. Nobody did. And really, for the last month and a half of the season, there weren't a lot of plays being made on defense, a lot of big play sacks, but not turnovers. Obviously, CJ missed a lot of those games too. But it bothered me. I didn't like it. And you know what? If you're going to tweet it, leave it up. Like deleting it.
Yeah, he deleted it pretty quickly. And then he tweeted that he was going to bed, which maybe should have stayed in bed.
Yeah. And, like if you're going to tweet it, like leave it up. And like, yeah, I tweeted it. I mean, because once you delete it, now it's out there. Everybody's got screenshots of it. Everybody has screen. Once one person has a screenshot, everyone has a screenshot of it. And now you just look like, I put it out there and now I'm deleting it. You look bad in multiple ways. And I understand his frustration, but not a good look. And it'll be interesting to see. I don't think it'll really affect anything in the long term. Probably won't go to Arizona as a free agent, I would guess. I don't think Gannon will be in a hurry to give him, $15 million a year, but yeah, not a good look. But look, that's who you get when you get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. You get a free spirit, you get a personality, you get a guy who'll say anything at any time. You get a great player, playmaker, guy who plays with a ton of energy and spirit, and you get the full package, and that's part of it.
Yeah, it is. It's a little. It's some immaturity, I think. In this case, at least, he's not wrong, of course, and I don't think that's a sentiment that's just shared by him. I mean, like I think he's not alone in that. thinking that Gannon didn't coach very well in that game. I'm sure he's not the only one, but
Sure.
I'm sure his agent called him pretty quickly and said, take that down. What are you doing? It's interesting. You're right, though. It probably crosses one team off the list. I still think he's going to end up back in Philly. I know there was some talk about maybe him getting a franchise tag. I don't think that's likely. Like, I think they're going to really just work to sign him. I don't even know if the franchise tag is like a placeholder really makes sense. I think it's more about just sign this guy, keep him for the long term, because he's really talented. He's young, and you have to take the whole person. It's the whole package with him, like you mentioned, but the whole package is still good. It's he's a fun guy to be around. Every once in a while, maybe you'll deal with something like this, but I think you live with it. It is not like he's not a bad guy. I don't think. I think it's just a little misguided, at least in this case.
Yeah, it might be different if Gannon was still here. I don't know if he would have tweeted. He probably would have, but he's gone, and you have a new defensive coordinator. I think he'll probably be here. I don't think it's a slam dunk. The franchise tag to me made a little sense because it's the lowest number, I think, other than running backs. I think running backs are like 10.5 and safeties are like 14. And, people ask about the franchise tag all the time. And the reason you don't want to do it if you're Howie is because it's a 1 year, it's guaranteed, and the entire amount is against your cap that year. And so you get to keep the player, but it's at a pretty high number. When you're designing a contract, if you're Howie and you're working you can design it to the benefit of both people. So the player gets his money, and you get to structure it in a way that spreads out the cap hits and into where you can handle them and where you can't. You don't structure a franchise tag. It's $14 million. As soon as he signs it, it's guaranteed for the year, whether he gets hurt, whatever. It's not ideal. It's not how you want to. That's why you see it so rarely. Sometimes there's extenuating circumstances, but and sometimes people just do it to keep a guy's rights through, while you're negotiating the long-term deal that you think will get done. But you're probably right. Probably it's not. I mean, it's not Howie's style to do that.
He really doesn't like using it.
Yeah.
And I think there's like the reasons you mentioned. It just doesn't make sense to do it for a lot of reasons. Now, if it's a player, you're just like, we absolutely just cannot lose this player. Maybe you're like forced into that if you really can't reach a deal. But ultimately, I think the goal is for a lot of franchise tag players is to find a deal. But if you can't find it, then you're stuck with that lump sum, and that's really not palatable for Howie as he tries to build this roster.
And you're only putting, you're only kicking the can down a year because you're still going to have the same problem. If you wanted the player bad enough to give him the franchise tag, you're going to want the player in the future too, not just for 1 year. So you're not really solving the problem. Now, you could do it again, but now the number is even bigger, and now it's killing your cap even more. So it's not a great option.
Yeah. Another GJ tweet recently was in support of Denard Wilson to be the next defensive coordinator, and that was piggybacking off of a Darius Slay tweet where he also voiced his support for Wilson. And we talked about this a little bit on the last pod. I don't think we got into it deep enough. I'm really curious to see how this plays out because Denard Wilson is still technically on staff. He's their defensive backs coach. And we are pretty late in the process here. We're into March. I don't know if he'll be back. I don't know what kind of situation that sets up because there were so many like staunch supporters of his in the building to get this job, and he doesn't get it. Like, can he just come back as the defensive backs coach at this point? I don't know.
I don't think so, honestly. But yeah, like you said, this is what happens when you go to the Super Bowl. This whole process starts so late. And that's why it's a little surprising, 2 assistants did get head coaching jobs because usually those Super Bowl teams don't have that all the time. But it's tough for him. I remember when, locker cleanout day, we were talking to James Bradbury, and he talked about his contract a little bit and talked about his future. And someone asked him about Denard, and his face just lit up. And, he just talked about what a great leader is, what a great technician. He said, I'm in my whatever year it was for Bradbury, 7th or 8th or whatever. And he said, I learned something new every day from him. He's, a great technician, great teacher. All the players like him, not just the D-backs is what he said. So, I was under the impression he was going to get this job. And Nick hasn't made it a secret all year when he talked about potentially losing coaches that Denard was a guy that he could see promoting. And if you're Denard, you're hearing that. And I mean, I would guess he's not super happy about it. I mean, if you hear all year, you're going to be the heir apparent for that job. And then next thing you know, you're a candidate, and then some guy from Seattle's coming in that nobody knows. That's a tricky situation, and it's going to be something that Nick's going to have to figure out how to navigate it, whether Denard is here or not, because Sean Desai has to win over that locker room. And if there's guys who are really loyal to Denard Wilson and are upset that he didn't get this job, that's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. And that's how people are. I mean, that's how we are with editors, that's why it's so good to promote from within so often if the candidate's qualified, which I think Denard is, but obviously Nick didn't think he was experienced enough is what, the message he gave out. But it's going to be interesting how this proceeds. I think someone out there is going to find a job for Denard Wilson. Even somebody who has a secondary coach, they might, people are inventing titles all the time. If you want this guy in your staff, and I don't think it's a tenable situation for him to be back. I could be wrong. I know if he's here, he'll be a professional and he'll do the job, but it makes it tough for Nick. It makes it tough for Sean Desai. Because now you're Denard and you're at practice, and all of a sudden you're talking to a linebacker. Oh, well, that's not my. I don't know. It's a tough situation. I'm curious to see how it'll resolve itself. But I think he's a really good coach, and I think wherever he goes, whether it's here or somewhere else, he'll do a good job. But I'm not sure it's a workable situation.
Yeah, I mean, from his perspective, it's pretty late in the process too. On that side, you're right. I guess the team could kind of invent a role for him, but most staffs are full.
Yeah,
like staffs are filled out around the league in a lot of places, and so I wonder if it's like it's almost like stringing him along for this job. He doesn't get it, and now he's kind of left with nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Fascinating though, because he is a really good coach. From as much as I talk to players and people around the league, it seems like he is very well respected. I really thought he was going to get the job, and he didn't get it. And I think a lot of it is Nick's philosophy on defense really aligns with what Sean Desai is going to do. Whereas I think a lot of people thought Denard would be keeping the status quo a little bit from Gannon, but I don't think that's the case. We look at Denard's history, and we brought this up when we were looking through the candidates, like Todd Bowles and Greg Williams, like those were different defenses than what Jonathan Gannon ran and a lot of the Fangio staples. So I wonder if that was part of the reason he didn't get the job, is like he wanted to change too much, which is kind of a weird concept that the internal candidate wants to change more than a guy you bring from somewhere else. But I think that could have been part of the deal too.
Well, I saw where Leslie Frazier's taking a year off in Buffalo. Maybe, I don't know who their secondary coach is. Maybe they'll promote. Who's their secondary coach? Maybe they'll promote him and have an opening. I'm just, because I think that just kind of happened today, right?
Recently, it might have been yesterday. Yeah.
John Butler is their D-backs coach. I'm not sure Sean McDermott has a relationship with Denard at all, but I'm just thinking out loud. But that you don't get a lot of openings like that this time of year. I don't know what Buffalo will do, but I'm just trying
Same division for a while.
Yeah, it's true. I'm guessing he won't be here.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's one of those dynamics that is a little unusual. I'm just curious to see how it plays out.
And even Nick's comments on Tuesday, uh, it might have been you who asked the question about will Denard be here? And I mean, he said, I don't know. I mean, like usually, you know, I mean, I know he likes him as a coach, but that kind of answer kind of tells you he doesn't think he's going to be here.
Yeah, probably.
Unless I'm looking too deep into it, but we'll see.
Yeah. Shane Steichen, or Shane Spikeman, as Gronk calls him, spoke to reporters on Wednesday at the combine. He went earlier than expected. I was glad I was waiting around because some guys missed him completely. That's how you really know he's out of the Eagles organization. He's showing up early to press conferences.
Yeah, that wouldn't be tolerated here.
Yeah. Late or nothing. It was interesting to talk to him a little bit. You always wonder about an offensive coordinator when they're under an offensive head coach. It's like, it's not their show. Like they're a part of it, but they can't really just like speak freely on everything. And it was already kind of interesting to hear him have a different tone as a head coach. But we got to ask him a bunch of different questions. I asked him about Brian Johnson because I'm really curious about this. Look, we all think Brian Johnson is going to do a good job, but there is a little unknown. Like as much as he's well thought of and as much as his resume is worthy of this gig, it's like you never really know until they're in a position. And the part of it I'm really curious about is play calling because Shane was so good at it. And I thought back about this after talking to Shane on Wednesday. I asked Nick Sirianni about it and I asked Shane Steichen about it, and they approached the question from two completely different areas, and it's very much like them. So I asked Nick about the play calling aspect for Brian Johnson, and he said, yeah, we do all this work during the week where we go through situations and third down, red zone, all these things, so that when we get in the game, yeah, you've already kind of lived through it. But then Steichen on the other side of it is like, yeah, we do that, but there's a feel in the game, and it's just a thing whether you have it or you don't. He's like, I think, and I'm paraphrasing, he's like, I think Brian has it, which like you put those two things together and you start feeling a little better about him being in that role.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, one thing about Nick, and he always spoke highly of Shane and his play calling, but he always managed to mention that it's still his offense and it's still collaborative during the week. All the coaches sit down and I mean, that was, and look, I don't blame him. Yeah. I mean, he wants to make sure everyone knows he's still the head coach. It's still his offense. But yeah, I think Shane just had such a flair for it. You could see right from the start. And it's funny because his personality doesn't really match. He's I don't know, he's not quiet, but he's kind of like, if you saw him in a press conference, you wouldn't be like, that guy is a hell of a play caller. Like he's not flashy. And
I don't know. I think I do see that with him.
Really?
I see like when I see him talking about offense, I see the wheels really turning. Like it feels like he's always a step ahead when he's talking about offense.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I guess I don't know. I just I always thought there was kind of like a dichotomy between his personality and his play calling. Whereas like Marty was like a really good play caller, but like you just spend like a minute around him and you knew he was just going to be all over the place as a play caller, which he was, which made him good at it. Andy was a good play caller for a while when he had good players, but like his personality is like, he never let that show at all. Anyway, getting off the topic, but yeah, it was interesting. I only saw bits and pieces of Steichen's presser. It seemed like he was asked about the quarterback and he just wants another Jalen. I mean, good luck finding it. What do you think they'll do?
They'll draft one.
But I mean, do you think they'll stay where they are? Or?
No. I think they'll go up and get their guy. Now, like whoever they pick, that'll probably determine where they have to go to get them. But I think they want to draft the quarterback. And I thought, I don't remember which reporter it was, asked them a pretty interesting question about, if you get a rookie quarterback that you can kind of build around, then you build your offense around him instead of bringing in a veteran who has these traits, and it's a little different. I think they're going to draft one, and the work ethic is the part he was talking about with Jalen. It wasn't like the traits or like the physical things. It was the work ethic. It's,
the 6
gets there early, leaves late. Jalen's kind of rare, not completely rare. A lot of quarterbacks work hard, but I think Jalen takes it to levels that are a little insane at times. But I think that is important. You need that, and Shane wants to find that, and Jonathan Gannon probably doesn't have that.
Right. That's true. Who do you think is going to have more success in the long run, Shane or Gannon? I mean, Kyler Murray can be a really dangerous quarterback. He's just so inconsistent.
He's talented. I don't know. There's so many factors that go into it. I don't know. I think the Colts are in a better situation roster-wise. I think the Cardinals are, they build a team to try to win, and then it didn't work, and now they just have like some old players they got to get rid of, some guys left, and they got to kind of rebuild that thing. Whereas at least Indy, I think they could be, if they find a quarterback, they could be competitive pretty quickly.
Yeah. It's interesting that Gannon got the job where the Super Bowl was, and Steichen got the job where the combine is. So they're both doing pressers in the place where they ended up coaching. Anyway, I don't know what that means. That was really a stupid thing to say.
That doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
No, it doesn't. I don't know. Sometimes I just think of these things. What was the did you get a sense of what the indie writers thought of Steichen? Was he as cordial with them as he was with us?
Yeah, I think he's a little flustered still. 2 weeks in, there's just so much to do. Yeah, but I think they're getting a good sense of him. One of the indie writers remarked, he likes you guys a lot more than us. And we're like, yeah, well, we've known him for 2 years, and he doesn't have to deal with us after today.
Yeah.
You can say goodbye to us and never talk to us again. So I'm curious to see how he does. I'm curious to see which quarterback he ends up with. I did want to bring up, aside from Brian Johnson, talks so highly of Alex Tanney, and we talked about Alex on the last pod, but the Eagles think the world of him, and Shane took it to great lengths talking about just how clear it was that this guy was ready for more responsibility almost the second he got to Philly.
Interesting. Was that at the podium?
Yeah.
Good. I need that quote.
Yeah, it was very good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a name that's always just come up. Just rising star. It'll be interesting to see how long, how long they have him and how long they have Brian. And those are the guys teams are going to be looking for, especially if the Eagles keep having success.
Yeah. You know what I wanted to bring up? We touched on them very briefly, but the Marcus Brady addition, he was a consultant during the last season, but bringing him on to the actual coaching staff as an offensive assistant, it's going to fly under the radar, but I think it's significant because where we've seen other head coaches kind of falter when they promote from within is that they don't replenish. But this is a pretty good move to replenish with a guy who's been an offensive coordinator before and has a decent resume. So like you bring him in, and now say you do lose Brian Johnson in a year, you have at least something else in the pipeline.
Yeah, and Nick's talked about that. I mean, with his ability to hire coaches who are going to get hired, you have to do that. You have to be able to replenish those entry-level positions, whether you call them coaches' assistants or quality control, whatever, just the guys who are below position coaches. And we've seen so many of them. That'd be an interesting story. We've seen so many of them rise up through the ranks here, and become coordinators and head coaches. And you look at that first Eagles coaching staff. I think Sean McDermott was a quality control guy. I mean, there's a few of those guys were So yeah, that's huge, and that's not easy to do, because like when are you scouting coaching talent? Like it's just a lot of that's word of mouth. Oh, this guy's good. I heard this guy's good, and so you just keep kind of talking to people who know them and worked with them and build up a binder of names. And yeah, that's huge. And Nick really leans on those guys, those low level guys. He seems to enjoy helping develop them and challenging them, and helping them get ready to kind of climb through the ranks.
Yeah, I think those guys really appreciate the work he puts in with them, especially like Gannon and Steichen. Like, he was preparing them for 2 years to be head coaches because that's what Frank Reich did for him. So I think that stuff matters, and like I bet you Gannon and Steichen will do that now in their spots, and so like pretty quickly, I think we're going to see this Sirianni coaching tree grow. And you look around the league already, and obviously it wasn't Sirianni, but it's amazing how many head coaches in the NFL have Eagles ties. I was
incredible.
standing, yeah.
I mean, all 5 new coaches this year either coached or played with the Eagles.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I was standing around for D'Amico Ryan's presser, and one of the Texans reporters remarked that to me. It was, I mean, you could go to every head coach press conference here because they all have some sort of ties to Philadelphia, and it's true. And I don't necessarily know if there's a real reason, because it's been different staffs.
Well, most of it's Andy, but really most of it's Lurie, because these are all products of people that Jeff Lurie has hired. I think that's where it starts. Jeff Lurie has hired head coaches who have built good staffs, and especially 2 of them, and I mean, Doug doesn't really have a tree yet. Even Chip has a tree. I mean, D'Amico's a Chip, he didn't coach under him, but he played under him.
Well, Doug's tree includes Nick.
Doug's tree?
Yeah. In a weird way. Because it goes from Doug to Frank to Nick.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in that way, everybody goes back to like Bill Walsh. Like everyone, if you look at the genealogy of it, like there actually are online, you can find these coaching trees, the Mike Holmgren tree and Andy Reid tree and the, Mike Shanahan tree. And they all eventually lead back to Bill Walsh. He's got like a tree of thousands. But I think Nick Sirianni's tree is kind of growing underground right now, but we can't all see it, but the roots are sprouting.
I knew you were going with that.
I had to.
Yeah, I think it matters to him, and we'll see. And I think they're in a good spot right now with the coordinators in place. We know more about Brian Johnson. We'll see about Sean Desai, but everything I've heard about him, I've kind of just been asking people who have been around him, and I've gotten some good feedback back already. And it seems like he's a well-respected guy. Seems like a decent guy for our purposes too. I've been asking about his media savvy, and it seems like he's willing to talk and give some information and explain things. So looking forward to that too.
That's all we really care about in the big picture. At Nissan, we just made your choice for a new car an easier one than ever with our most exciting and fuel-efficient lineup. The choice is yours. Now get great offers across our full line. Shop your local Nissan store today and nissanusa.com.
Catch all the sports action and more at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Whether it's the money line or the pass line, there's something for everyone in the great sports book. Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Philly loves a winner. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Opioid addiction is a national public health crisis. The Someone You Know podcast from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanize disease of addiction. Download the new season 3 of Someone You Know on all major podcast platforms. Rube, the combine is for the draft. It's funny because it's really about free agency and coaching hires this year, but the draft is right around the corner too. And the Eagles have plenty of picks, 2 in the first round, number 10 and number 30. So we promised that we'd finally start talking about a few of these prospects and at least positionally where the Eagles could go. I figured we'd start with, you and I have put out our first mock drafts. It's mock draft season. And we kind of did the reverse of each other. I had them going.
I didn't look at yours before I did mine, by the way.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. So I had them going with a defensive lineman or an edge player, I should say, and then a cornerback with the second first-round pick. You had them going the flip of that. You had them going cornerback, edge rusher. I think we both kind of agree that it would be shocking if Howie stays at pick 10 and pick 30 and just picks players. He doesn't do that. But I do think we're on to something with the combination of positions that are possible.
Yeah. And, it's not like he's going to draft for exclusively best player available. But when you look at the offense, I mean, they're not going to draft a receiver in the first round. They're not going to draft a quarterback. They're not going to draft.
Are you sure they're not going to draft a receiver? Is that completely off the board?
No, I wouldn't say I'm sure, but I think it's unlikely.
Okay.
I think it's unlikely. It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me, but I think the odds are slim. And I mean, I'll tell you what, if it's going to be an offensive player, it's going to be an O lineman or receiver. And O lineman's always in play with Howie, but every time let me start with this. What pick do you think is more likely for him to trade? Because I think it's 10.
Which way?
Down.
Into the teams?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also think there's a scenario where they could trade up though. Like if there are 4 quarterbacks in the first 5 picks, which is very possible, you're talking about, there could be a really good player sliding down the board into their range. So if one of the, I don't know who it would be, Will Anderson or Jalen Carter obviously has his own legal stuff going on right now. So I don't know how that's going to resolve itself. But like if there's one of those, or Tyree Wilson, like if one of those players slides down into their range, I mean, we've seen it before. He did it with Jordan Davis last year. He did it with Andre Dillard in 19. Like if a player they think is really good slides into their range, they'll go after him.
That's true. It was funny because Howie was asked about quarterbacks Tuesday, right? And he said he thinks there's going to be a lot. I don't know why anyone would ask him about quarterbacks, but he said I think they'll go really early. And he said I hope they do, because he hopes they do because it helps them. I think with Howie everything's in play. Trading up, trading down, trading both picks. I think the only thing that's not in play is trading neither one. But who knows? He could do that too. I mean, if it makes sense. One of these years, Howie's going to trade like a pick, get out of that spot, and then trade other picks, get back into that spot with more assets, and end up in the same spot he was, but just with another pick. I mean, he's, so it makes it tough to predict because anything's possible. And he's so good at I think going into the draft prepared for every scenario. I mean, he's really, really good at being able to think on the move. And you don't have a lot of time when picks start getting traded, players start getting picked. All this stuff is happening, in first round, in real time. He's got a real good sense of being able to stay on top of that and understand what still makes sense for the Eagles. And, you have to be really, and you have to be really prepared for all those contingencies. I think he told us last year, didn't he say he had like all these potential trades, like he had a different draft order for every imaginable scenario. So then when it happens, he's ready. So to predict what he's going to do, it's almost impossible because he doesn't know what he's going to do.
Yeah, and I brought up those examples of them like moving up for a player that falls in their range. There's also an example of them trading out of the first round with a late first round pick. Like you think back to when they won the Super Bowl and they had the last pick in the first round. That was the year Lamar Jackson came out. So He traded out of the first round. Then he ended up trading back up a few picks to get Dallas Goedert. So he's always willing to be very mobile and add value in the draft. And that's the way he looks at it. It's not just about getting the best players. It's about getting the best players at the best value. And he's done that really well. And, maybe like he's obviously missed on some picks. It happens. And there have been some bad draft picks for sure, disastrous draft picks, but they certainly have been. But I do appreciate his approach to it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to go through your picks for him?
Sure.
Your mock. So you had them taking Devin Witherspoon at number 10 from Illinois. Really fun corner. Might be the best corner in the draft. He's one of. I think there's really the three top corners are Witherspoon, Joey Porter Jr., and Christian Gonzalez. And I think they could probably go in any order.
Right.
I think it's going to be a preference thing. And the Eagles haven't drafted a cornerback in the first round since 2002. We know the history, but this would be a year where it makes sense.
Lito Shepherd, haven't drafted any corners since the Rasul Sidney Jones draft in 2017.
Well, Zach McPherson.
In the first few, let's say in the first 4 rounds.
Okay.
Yeah. They have drafted corners. But and I think it's also tricky to do this before the combine too, because somebody could run really slow and hurt himself or just have a bad workout. But I think those guys kind of are in their own category. There's still depth. There's still good corners later. And if there's somebody,
a very good corner draft from, the experts are telling, like Daniel Jeremiah is talking up all these good corners. And I think there are. But it kind of lines up with their needs. We both like edge players and corners, and it seems like it's a good draft for both.
Yeah. And Howie, you can get almost, Howie loves the second round. And I think there's going to be good corners in the second round. There'll probably be good edges as well. That's why I think there's a chance if especially for a corner, because I think there's a lot of depth in the corner group. And we'll know more in a few, in another week. But most of the really good defensive backs in Eagles history have been not been first round picks. So, I think, look, Zach McPherson, maybe they like him. Maybe they, they feel like he's the heir apparent. But I really think I'll be surprised if they don't get a corner in the first 2 rounds. I'll be really surprised. And I looked into one thing I wrote about was how I think rookie corners are a lot more prepared for the NFL than they used to be, just because so many more teams are playing pro-style offenses, and that gets corners more prepared. And the reason for that is because they know they can't get the top prospects if they're playing like a spread or something. The top prospects want to play in a pro-style offense, so they get drafted higher so they make more money. So I feel like 10 years ago, there weren't a lot of – like the Pac-10 always had pro-style offenses for some reason, but other conferences didn't. But they're starting to – they're bringing in NFL coaches. They're running NFL offenses, maybe not as complicated, but it's helping receivers – come in and make an impact. And it's also helping corners because they're facing NFL style offenses in college, which they never used to. And I think it makes the transition a lot easier. And I looked it up. I think until 2010, there'd been 9 Pro Bowl corners as rookies. And since then there've been 10. So guys are making, we see guys like, Trayvon Diggs. The NFL co-interception leader this year was a rookie quarterback. So I think the guy can, I think the expectation is if you draft a corner in the first couple rounds, that guy's going to come in and play and start.
Yeah. And you mentioned Sauce just then and Sauce Gardner, Patrick Surtain, Horn in that draft. Stingley played fairly well in Houston. So, I think that there's an expectation now where you can get that guy. And even later in the those guys were high first round picks, but I think back to Tre'Davious White was, I think, the 27th pick So you can
Yeah.
still find elite corner who's going to play well immediately in the late first round. I had them taking Cam Smith from South Carolina at pick number 30. You had them taking who? Felix Anudike-Uzomah
Yeah.
at 30.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are like options. Like, what's the better hit rate? Do you go? I had them taking Miles Murphy, who may or may not be there, but are you better off going if it's going to be some combination of that, like edge early then corner, or corner early then edge? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's any real way to tell. I don't think there's any real pattern. It's just getting the right guy. Boy, did I hear for Barrett on a huddle, picking a K-State guy though. Yeah. Oh my God, he was insufferable with the K-State stuff. But he starts singing the fight song and all that stuff. But yeah, I think it could go either way, and I think it'll crystallize as we get closer to the draft. Kind of we'll get a better idea where these guys are going to go. I mean, we're still a couple months out, so just under a couple months out. So, but yeah, I think we kind of see it the same way, and I think it's a real luxury for Howie that the two positions of the greatest need happen to be two of the deepest positions in the draft. So he can say best available, but he's drafted for need as well.
And the running backs too. I know that it's unlikely they'll draft one in the first round, but Daniel Jeremiah said he gave 13 running backs grades in the top 3 rounds. Wow. Obviously 13 won't go, but that means that there's going to be good players on day 3 at that position still out there. So they even have a chance to draft a plug and play replacement for Miles Sanders. And we never know how it's going to work out, but that is a position where we've seen over the years, you can just kind of plug those guys in and expect them to play fairly well as rookies. Unless you get Donnell Pumphrey. I'm sorry, that was mean.
Yeah, that was it was really mean. The last running back the Eagles drafted in the first round was Keith Byers in '86. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not going to happen, but I definitely would expect him.
If Robinson's there at pick 30, which I don't think he will be.
Yeah.
You have to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. It'll be interesting if he's there.
He won't be there.
No, he won't be there. But I would take him. And I'm like king of the never take a running back in the first round. But you're picking at 30, 31, 30, however you want to say it.
30.
He's probably too talented to let him go. But I don't think he'll be there. Yeah, but I would take him.
I wanted to talk about this quarterback sneak, tush push, possibly getting outlawed in the NFL. It's kind of been the talk of the combine this week a little bit. And there is some opposition to it. Like some teams probably do want to eliminate it. And I think that it is probably going to get voted on at the owners' meetings, or at least it'll be brought up. But I was actually fascinated by how many coaches praise the Eagles for figuring this out and thinking outside the box. I heard Pete Carroll was just raving about him, and he's like, this can be a chance to like evolutionize the game because it is such an effective play. Now, I don't think it will be as effective for some other teams, honestly, because the Eagles have it all starts with the offensive line and a quarterback. Obviously, the push helps, but they're getting a push without the push. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it is fascinating that like so many teams are looking at the Eagles and patting them on the back and saying, you guys did something here. And it's not just this like brute strength thing. There's technique behind it, and they coached it well, and they figured out a way to get a leg up on the competition, and they just hammered the heck out of it this year.
Yeah, and it was almost infallible play for them. I think they had a couple that they didn't convert. 3 of them maybe? Were they 34 for 37? And look, they have other good players, and they have other good plays. They have other ways to score. I don't think it'll be disastrous but it's funny because like a lot of the teams that are praising them will probably vote against allowing it. but it'll change. Like it'll change the way they do things, and they can also line up to do it and then fake. Run a pitch. I think they did that and got like a big play early in the year to Miles. So there's other ways you can do it, but obviously without that, you don't have that element of surprise. I think they're going to let it go. I don't think they're going to overturn it, but will they need 2/3 vote or just
75%?
75%. Yeah, I'd be surprised. If I mean that's a lot. But it's funny because it seems like they're like people are gang. I mean, the Eagles run it a lot more than anyone. I don't even know if anyone really has tried to. Do other teams do it regularly? I don't know.
Well, I mean, teams sneak it. The Eagles have kind of been innovative with the push element of it.
Right. That's what I mean. Yeah. I mean, obviously the teams sneak it, but they'll still have a really effective goal line offense without it. I mean,
yeah. And it's not like they'd use the push on every single one.
Right. But as long as Kelsey's there and Dickerson, and I mean, they're gonna be okay, but they would miss it.
They would, and I know they're really proud of what they've built off of it. Like you mentioned, the pitch to Miles, like I was begging for that shot play off and they just never gave it to me. I said plus territory, 3rd and 1, fake the sneak, throw a bomb. It doesn't work. Sneak it on 4th down. They never did it for me.
I remember the Eagles doing that with Randall throwing an 80-yarder to Chris Carter on a 4th and inches. Faking a sneak.
It's gutsy on 4th down.
Sorry?
It's gutsy on 4th down. I'd run it on 3rd and short and give myself an opportunity to pick it up on 4th.
Yeah, they did that on 4th down. But yeah, that was a long time ago. I mean, I think it was 4th down. It might have been 3rd down. I'll look it up. I'll have that for you next pod.
I appreciate it.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah. Last little note here. Joint practices. This time the Browns coming to Philly in August. That's good. We won't have to go to Cleveland again.
I was hoping we'd have them in Indy. I was hoping Nick and Shane would do them just so I could see you be miserable back in Indianapolis for 5 days.
Thank you for that.
No such luck, but I enjoy them. I like joint practices. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a second round of them.
I think Nick will do that. I mean, he values them so much, and he doesn't care about the preseason games. So
right. So so the Browns. So we know one preseason game the Browns will be here. I tweeted out the photo of you and Myles Garrett, so I'm sure you guys there. There we go. That's Dave on the left and Myles on the right, by the way.
Your left or stage left?
Yeah, our left, looking at the picture. Okay. But yeah, that was a fun day. You caught up with Myles, talking to him about Jordan Mailata, and that was really cool. But I enjoy him. It certainly livens up practice, and look forward to him.
You got anything else?
No.
Let's wrap this up. My coffee's running a little low here. I need to replenish. But if you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. That's it. We'll talk to you soon. For Rube, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye presented by Nissan.